Welcome to the Kickass Couples Podcast. This is the place where we help committed couples who want to level up their marriage experience newfound clarity, hope, and confidence. We're Matthew and Kim, co-hosts and husband and wife.
In 26 years together, we've seen a lot and never thought it could be as good as it is right now. We're here to help you successfully navigate the messy, dirty, and wonderful world of marriage.
We believe all couples deserve and are capable of experiencing an extraordinary and fulfilling marriage. And each week, we're bringing you life lessons from real-life successful couples to help you grow and strengthen your relationship.
We'll get started right after this message.
If you want to learn how to experience the best, most fulfilling year of your marriage, we invite you to order Matthew's new book, Kickass Husband, Winning at Life, Marriage, and Sex. You can get it at Amazon.com or visit Matthew's website, www.matthewphoffman.com. Again, that's Amazon.com or www.matthewphoffman.com. And now, back to the show.
We are so excited to be back on the Kickass Couples Podcast today with you, our family, Kickass Couples Nation. And today we get to do a deep dive on one of our key pillars, and that pillar is intimacy.
I'm really excited about talking about intimacy today because I feel like the more I've learned about intimacy, the better I get in my own relationship. And I feel like it's almost like peeling back layers of an onion because there are a lot of different layers to intimacy.
There are. I've come so far in understanding really what intimacy is. As a guy, I would say I have that typical feeling of intimacy means sex, and it can, but there's so much more. And I want to share a little quote from you from Lianla Van Zandt about intimacy. She said, "In my mind, marriage is a spiritual partnership and union in which we willingly give and receive love, create and share intimacy, and open ourselves to be available and accessible to another human being in order to heal, learn, and grow." And I think that's what it's really about, Kim, is making ourselves accessible to another human being. So if you had to, like what you said earlier a minute ago, there's a lot of different types of intimacy. Can you walk us through what those are and what you've come to understand?
Definitely. There's 5 types of intimacy. And it starts with spiritual intimacy. There's experiential intimacy. There is emotional intimacy. There is physical intimacy, and there's intellectual intimacy. So there's really a lot of different ways that we can be intimate and close to our partner.
That's great. I remember one of the episodes we did with Natalie and Eric Southward, she kind of gave us a recipe for intimacy, and I made her back up and walk us through that. If you haven't listened to that episode and you want to learn what you can do to make that more intimate, then check out that episode with Natalie and Eric. But what she said, Kim, I think she said it started for her when she would see her husband praying with her children. And she said, that's a great example of spiritual intimacy. And she experienced that.
Yeah, I love that episode because I love how she broke it down for herself and for her spouse. And so I think that, we all resonate with different types of intimacy. And I look at sort of what binds me to you. And I would have to say that for me, emotional intimacy, and I think that a lot of women feel like emotional intimacy really comes first for them. They want to feel close and connected, and they want to feel safe and secure with their partner. And so I think that when that emotional need is met, that all of those other things come into play.
I think a great analogy, Kim, if you think of the different kinds of intimacy, there's 5, and there's other people out there who would add more to that list, maybe make it grow to 6 or 7.
Definitely.
I think if you think of it like a muscle group, emotional is an important muscle group, spiritual, intellectual, all those physical, and then physical meaning proximity and touch, but not sex. And then, spiritual and intellectual, right? So you got all these different kinds in there. And like your body, you've got to work all your muscle groups. If you just work on one, you're going to be pretty imbalanced and out of whack, and there's not going to be a great relationship. So I think for you, you said, and I think it's true for most women, emotional is most important. So if women put emotional probably very high, if not top on the list, that men, and I think when my sense of intimacy was pretty underdeveloped and I didn't really have awareness, I'd say most men would say intimacy means sex. And it can, and it does. But if you want to arrive at that spot and have your spouse be ready and wanting to be at that spot with you, then you've got to take a walk through all the other types to get there. And so, guys, if you want your wife to be turned on, tuned in, and really into you and wanting to have that physical intimacy, you got to spend some time kind of building the foundation to get there. And I think it's a learned skill. It's not something we're born with. But if you take the time to make those emotional connections, spiritual connections, talking about faith, reading an article together, intellectual. Kim and I took an online webinar a couple of months ago with Esther Perel and David White. And he is a poet and she's a psychotherapist. And we spent about an hour and a half, an hour and 15 minutes together. That's a great example of developing our intellectual intimacy because we were growing and learning together through a shared experience. And it brought us tighter and gave us a lot of questions and things to think and talk about as we develop.
Definitely. And I think that when, we really understand our spouse's need and whatever that need for intimacy is, it's almost like a love language, right? We can really learn and grow together if we're meeting that intimate need of our spouse. And for me, it could just be holding hands, going for a walk, having those deep dive conversations, sharing our inner world. I mean, those are the things that I feel bring me closer to you. So
I would agree with that. And I think one of the things you talked about, sharing the inner world, you've got to have a high degree of trust. That's another one of our pillars. And you need to be comfortable saying anything to your spouse. And if you want to bring closer, draw closer, lean in, as we would say, to your number one, then it's really about sharing your hopes, dreams, your greatest fears. So when you open yourself up, and as the quote said when we opened our episode, when you become more accessible and you're sharing of yourself, that strengthens that bond. That's emotional intimacy. That's getting close on a deeper level. And when you're close emotionally, spiritually, intellectually, in all those different ways, then physical and or sexual intimacy is a natural outcropping and occurrence. And it's not just where both people have arrived at the same spot, but that physical intimacy is so much more meaningful when there's something behind it. And it's not just merely a physical need that needs to be met. And, intimacy sometimes may feel that way. And that's okay. But if the overriding piece of your intimacy with your partner is just about getting a need met, and it's not about meeting their needs and being selfless, it's not going to be healthy for the relationship in the long term.
I think it's important to point out that vulnerability piece that you were just talking about a few minutes ago is so important, because when we are really able to be vulnerable, open, talk about all those deep, dark fears, or maybe even just successes, or needs and wants, right? I think that really does bring us closer together. And it's such a huge piece of being intimate with one another.
I think you hit on something really good, Kim. One of the questions we ask and talk about is, what should real intimacy make us feel like? And let's take some turns going back and forth. You just shared one, and kind of along those same lines is being known and understood. Everybody has the desire to be understood in life, especially by our number one, by our life partner. If we don't feel that our partner understands us and they really know who we are, it is really difficult to cross that divide, that chasm, and become intimate with them. So being known and understood, like, hey, you get me. And sometimes that comes through questions and conversations. Sometimes it's just a smile and a nod where your partner can recognize and say, I get it. I understand it.
Yeah, I think of being feeling like you're appreciated, that you're cherished is huge. Everyone wants to feel cherished and important. to their spouse or their significant other. And so I feel like that's a big one. There are a lot more. I mean, just safety and security is really huge. And it plays a big role in intimacy in our relationship, because if I don't feel safe with you, I'm not going to open up to you. What else do you?
What I'd love to talk about, Kim, can you think about, let's kind of popcorn a little bit. What can people do if they want to achieve, they want their spouse to be cherished, or they want them to have that trust and security? What are some of the things that you've seen in our relationship that you've done or I've done that have helped create that? I know, one of the things, we recently had a big loss. We've talked about it in other episodes of Maine at our podcast studio. And Kim knows, I mean, it was really tough for her. It was tough for me. And she knew that, I was seeing a dream what I thought evaporate, but she pulled up alongside me, was next to me, and really made sure I knew that she was there. Whatever she needed, whatever we needed, whatever I needed, she was there. And so that's a great example of me feeling known and understood, but also letting her know that she's got my back no matter what. So that's something she did for me. So it's not trying to solve the issue or come in and take responsibility. It's just quietly calming, like a parent to a child, comforting them and letting them know you're alongside them and you're sitting in the spot where they are at the same time.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think letting your spouse know that, you're not going anywhere. I'm here. Doesn't matter what happens, what comes our way, what challenges we have. Maybe we're having challenges and we're not communicating well. But at the end of the day, I'm not going anywhere. I'm right here beside you, and we're going to work through this. I think another thing that we do, or you really do it probably a little better than I do, is you speak appreciation. You are very considerate about acknowledging out loud to me things that you notice me doing or things that you're grateful for. And I think that goes a long way to creating intimacy.
When it comes to creating a kick-ass marriage, do you ever wonder what you could be doing better? Have you ever thought how helpful it would be to be a part of a like-minded community of other imperfect couples who want to level up in their number one relationship? Come visit Kickass Couples Nation, where you can talk with people just like you who are looking for ways to invest in and increase their joy, commitment, and fulfillment in their most important human relationship. You'll have access to a team of licensed marriage therapists, coaches, articles, podcasts, live webinars, and more. Just visit MatthewPHoffman.com so you can learn more about a community that's ready to help you level up. That's MatthewPHoffman.com so you can become of the growing Kickass Couples Nation right now.
It does. And I appreciate your recognition of that. Gratitude, is one thing. We've talked about this before. And when gratitude is free currency. And if you have it and you don't express it, it's like having money and never using it. And I appreciate you that. What are some of the inhibitors? Like we kind of talk about what gets in the way, the roadblock or the walls, but what's one thing that you see getting in the way of people reaching that level of intimacy that they'd like to have in their relationship?
Gosh, I think communication is huge. I think when we're not communicating well, or we're not setting aside the distractions and creating time to communicate, that's a huge inhibitor.
Yeah. And, you talked about, Kim, about setting aside the time. And we've said this so many times. And a lot of the relationship masters that we've had the pleasure of talking to on this podcast say, we schedule time to be together. And I'm a scheduled person. If you just say, oh, we'll do it later, we'll have it at some time, later's not a time. And sometime is not a time. And I really think the intentionality of scheduling time to communicate on anything.
Creating the space to actually sit down without the distractions is huge. And it's critical, because if we don't, then we are like two ships passing in the night. We can say we're going to do it later, but 9 times out of 10 later comes and we're too exhausted or too tired and just, don't have it in us to have that really great sit down time to communicate with each other.
Yeah. And I think another thing that gets in the way, Kim, after communication would be conflict. And usually it's opinion. or someone's thought of how something should be versus the other. And, one of the hardest things in conflict resolution really leads into intimacy is not having to be right, or saying, how important is it for me to get my way? And it's really changing that I and you to us. And if either spouse can make the decision, if it's a win for us, it's a win for the relationship, then that's going to open the door of greater intimacy, because you're not spending energy communicating and trying to resolve conflict, but you're really putting aside personal desire and saying, what's best for the relationship? Because if the relationship wins, then both people win over any specific issue. So that's something that if you have that approach about conflict, it really allows you to maintain and pursue that intimacy, I think.
Yeah. And there are several that things that are out there that can inhibit you from becoming intimate. It can be, extended family issues that are constantly showing up in your relationship. It could be financial issues that you're struggling with. And so I feel like there are a lot of outside influences when it comes to intimacy. And we have to be really careful to keep those in check so that it does not interfere with our core relationship.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And, I always like to bring things back. We have our Kickass Couples assessment, Kim. And I'm going to just kind of share with our listeners, if you haven't done that assessment, it's free. You go to our website, matthewphoffman.com, and you can take that assessment. And it's just a great way to kind of understand how you feel about the relationship, how your partner does. And under the intimacy pillar there, if you are successfully demonstrating strong intimacy in your relationship, this is what it might look like. You enjoy and seek physical touch. Touch is one of my big love languages and one of Kim's as well. You're affectionate. You're expressing affection. You're sharing emotions and secrets, those deep, dark fears and things we spoke about earlier. You're romantic. You keep pursuing your partner and choosing them first over other things. And then you make sure that you have mutually enjoyable sex. It's not good for you unless it's good for them as well. Can't be selfish in there. And Kim, some of the things that if you're not demonstrating it, this is what it might look like in your relationship. You're physically distant. You lack affection for your partner. You're emotionally closed. You have wandering eyes, and you might be demanding sex. So I encourage you to, if you want to really work on intimacy, is take that walk with your partner through that assessment and see how you're each responding there. And it'll give you an indication of opportunities maybe to work on strengthening.
Yeah, for sure. There are a lot of opportunities when it comes to intimacy. And I think this kind of goes without saying, but know your partner's love language. We talk about that a lot. I think so many people miss the boat on that, just that one simple idea of knowing what really resonates with your partner, what they truly love, how they want to be loved.
Yeah.
I think that enough of us don't really look at that and act on it.
Yeah, and we talk about questions, and one of my favorite questions, and I do ask this to Kim, and she'll ask me sometimes if we're maybe distant or not quite hitting on the communication, is do a fill in the blank. Ask your spouse this question. Say, I want you to fill in the blank. I feel most loved by you when, and then what is it that you want your partner to do? Or when your partner does something, what's the answer to you feeling most loved by them? And if you don't know that answer, say, I feel most loved by you when, and then fill in the blank with your own answer to make sure your partner knows, and then have them do the same thing with you. But if you don't know, I know Kim's, and I'm constantly working to provide that to her because I want to be intimate with her in as many ways as we can. And it's a great question. So if you haven't done it, or if you haven't done it in a while, I encourage you to ask that question and have them fill in the blank.
I love that idea about check-ins. I think that it's a great concept. And the more we are taking ourselves out of the way and focusing on our partner, and just, it can be just as short and simple as, how are you doing? I noticed XYZ, especially if they're having a tough day. Or, how are you doing today? I'm feeling, a little anxious today. Maybe something happened within the family, and just doing those little questions, I think really draws us closer to our partner. sometimes we just ignore those things and kind of shuffle them under the rug and move on. But I think asking and checking in is simple and it's easy, and it goes a long way to creating intimacy.
That's a great point, Kim. Asking the right questions is huge, because neither of us are mind readers. We can't look at our spouse. Sometimes you can take physical and nonverbal cues. That's important, but we can't read their mind. So when you're feeling a certain way and you have an emotion, a great one, a bad one, or struggling, nothing wrong with going to your partner and saying, hey, I'm having a tough day and here's why. Because what are you doing? You're building the bond of intimacy with them, and you're sharing things about your deep and inner world and giving them what they need to help form that connection and to make sure they're prioritizing you in your daily life.
Yeah. So if we don't have great intimacy in our relationship, and we don't know where to start with creating intimacy in our relationship with our spouse, where do we begin? How do we do this, bring this intimacy into our relationship?
Well, I think that's a great question. We spending time together, specifically scheduling activities and doing things, I think you really have to take a basic inventory, Kim, of where, we talked about 5 different types and there's others. Sit down and say, how do you see those or not see those things occurring in your relationship? And for example, I'll use the spiritual element of intimacy. My wife and I pray together often. We pray for each other. We may share an article or a video or a podcast or a sermon together. So we are constantly doing things that will build that leg of intimacy. And I think it's all about activity and time in the saddle, so to speak, right? We can't just think about it in ethereal and philosophical terms. The rubber hits the road when we plan intentional activities. And there are things that you can do with your spouse around each kind of intimacy. And that includes sexual, right? I mean, it talks, you got to talk about what you like, what you don't like, mix it up. If you're caught in a rut in the same old routine, we all face that, but it's making sure that you're intentional and doing things to mix up and spice up that. And everybody taking turns, not just the male being the only one, not just the female. So I think, Kim, if you want to know where to start, I think do a little inventory on how you see intimacy playing out in those 5 types that we mentioned. We'll put it in the show notes about what those kinds are. And we'll also put the episode, if you want to go and hear from a relationship nirvana, Natalie walks through the formula for intimacy, and we'll put that in the show notes for you. But that's where I would say they could start.
Yeah, I agree. And I would also add to that, building a friendship system. I feel that building that really great foundation of a friendship is huge when it comes to creating intimacy. When we're doing that, we're taking walks together, we're playing together, we're talking about our hopes and dreams. So we're love mapping. And so I feel like building that friendship system is huge. It's what's really foundational for us.
Yeah, anybody can have sex. And you can have sex with a stranger. Exactly. You don't have to be friends, right? But building that friendship system is the foundation that allows you to know your partner, to get into their inner world, ask the questions, and those are the things that build intimacy, that bring you to the destination of great sex. It's
what bonds me to you. I mean, when all of those things are coming into play, and I feel like if we're really looking at, what intimacy is, it's all of our pillars clicking together. It's us working and growing and trying to really make sure that we know what those pillars are, and we're using those pillars and working on bettering ourselves in those pillars that create intimacy within the relationship.
And that's why we're here. That's why we're here at Kickass Couples Nation. There's so much more we could talk about on intimacy, but if you want to learn more about the 14 pillars, if you want to have any of the resources on the assessment, go to matthewphoffman.com and you can take the assessment for free. You can look at what our pillars are. We've got training on relationships. We are here to help you have a better journey, to have the tools in the toolbox, and to be more satisfied in your number one relationship. I want to end with a little quote from Erwin McManus. We're big fans of Erwin.
Love Erwin.
And his books and the Battle Ready podcast with his son, Aaron. And this is an excerpt from his book called Soul Cravings. And Erwin says, sex can be the most intimate and beautiful expression of love. but we are only lying to ourselves when we act as if sex is proof of love. Too many men demand sex as proof of love. Too many women have given sex in hopes of love. We live in a world of users where we abuse each other to dull the pain of aloneness. We all long for intimacy, and physical contact can appear as intimacy, at least for a moment. So something to think about. So we would encourage you to end up there, but don't start there. And make sure you take the time to build those other elements that are going to give you the kind of intimacy that you can only hope and dream for in your relationship. So thanks for listening and tuning in today. We're so glad to have you with us. If you like this episode, please give us a thumbs up, rate us. And if you do that and send your review to podcast at kickasscouplespodcast.com, we've got a gift for you and we'd love for you to do it. And so, Kim, what do they need to remember?
Happily ever after doesn't just happen. It's on purpose.
We'll see you out there.
That's all we've got for this episode of the Kickass Couples Podcast. If you like the content of this show, you'll love Matthew's newly released book, Kickass Husband, Winning at Life, Marriage, and Sex. To receive a digital mini book of quotes and images from the book, all you have to do is rate this show and leave a review in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you tune in to listen. Then email us a screenshot of your review at podcast@kickasscouplespodcast.com, and we'll get it over to you right away. Until next time, remember, happily ever after doesn't just happen, it's on purpose.